Oregon's defense was elite this past year, and good news, it can be even better in 2026.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again, for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network. I thank you all, especially my everydayers, for helping make that the case. Our next 2026 recruit breakdown is none other than the legend himself, Tristan Phillips. And we've got some trivia to take care of. Lots coming on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla-y, cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. I choose, because I want to have an accurate reflection of things, to remember Oregon's defense for what it was, not what we last saw it as. And though literally half of the points that were given up to Indiana in the Peach Bowl debacle were because the offense screwed up, or the punting unit. I mean, you had a drive inside the 5 for Indiana, you had a drive inside the 30, and then you had the punt blocked, and that sent up a drive, I think, inside the 15, and then you had the pick 6. That was half of the points. Still, it's fair to look at that game and say Oregon's defense did not play its best game. Certainly, they did not. However, on the whole, this was a defense that performed incredibly well, improved in ways that I think we were hoping that it would. And going into next year, I think there are two ways in particular that it can be significantly better than it was in 2025. Number one is the pass rush. This was not a great statistical season for Oregon getting after the quarterback and actually getting him on the ground. Part of that is Mateo Uiagalelei. Part of that is everybody else as well. And I'm excited to see what Chris Hampton does in this particular area, because taking over as the defensive play caller, a role that he has had before, not with Oregon, but going back to his time at Tulane with the Green Wave before he came to Oregon to be the co-DC. One way you can, of course, generate pressure is calling the right types of blitzes. I watched my guy Mike McDonald do that in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. It was really fun to watch. Oregon wanted, I think, to get pressure with 4 a lot this past year. It's not that they didn't blitz, but were they wildly successful? Not consistently, no. So Tatum Tuioti was incredibly productive getting after the quarterback. Mateo's got to be better. You'd like to get some more interior pass rush, but I'm interested to see what type of schematic changes, if any, Chris Hampton brings to the table and how that goes. And I've got a pretty high level of confidence that he's going to be able to succeed. But quarterback pressure is certainly one area, I think the most glaring area that we can all look at and go, okay, the Ducks were not bad. You know, in 2022, they had a historically bad season, their worst since like the early 2000s, getting after the quarterback and sacking him. Their leading sacker was DJ Johnson. I think he had 6.5 sacks or so. Tatum Tuioti had 9.5 this past year. Mateo had 6. But it certainly wasn't the sort of year that Oregon needed. And when you go up against guys like Fernando Mendoza, well, you've just got to be able to generate more pressure and be more disruptive. And this has been a consistent theme for Dan Lanning's defenses over the last couple of years. When they've gone up against good to NFL caliber quarterbacks with good to NFL caliber receivers, they've struggled. Against everybody else, it's been a struggle. And I think the pass defense in particular was sensational this past year. Indiana is just ridiculous. They've got the number 1 pick in the NFL draft throwing to 3 NFL wideouts. Yeah, sometimes those guys just made some really, really good plays. So that's one area in particular. Another one is the linebacker position. And Bryce Boettcher is a legend. I love Bryce Boettcher. He just had 2 wildly productive seasons. I'm going to talk about the linebackers a little bit more later. I do think that group has some room for growth They were solid. Remember, it was an outright weakness at one point of the year, and then that play leveled up to at least be, neutral of sorts. But can you get back to a place where it's actually a plus, where it's actually a high impact unit, not just guys that are making tackles on plays that are down the field, but actually making more plays behind the line of scrimmage or being good in coverage. And Bryce Boettcher was good in coverage. Well, I think they were all actually good in coverage, but stopping the run, there can definitely be some growth there. But that leads me to this SSA that came in, which you can always send in, YouTube comments, Twitter. You guys know how to get in touch with me by this point. I try to make it as easy as possible. If you want priority access, become a Locked On Ducks insider. That link in the description below. You get a free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. SSA, Oregon has the best defense in college football in 2026. Ooh. So, this past year, Oregon finished 17th in the country in points per game allowed at 17.9. That was the best of the Dan Lanning era so far. Best or second best? And they averaged just 273 yards per game allowed, which was 7th. This was an elite defense. I choose to think about them more as what they did against Texas Tech than what happened against Indiana, because the offense let that game get away from them by literally gifting the Hoosiers at least 21, really 28 points. But in the first half, 21 points were, here you go. It's as easy as it gets. The best defense in college football statistically last year was one that I thought was going to make a run in the playoff, but Indiana quickly showed up. Indiana's the best team. Ohio State gave up 9.3 points a game last year and 219 yards per game. Can Oregon get there this year? If Chris Hampton is as good as we hope he is going to be, the answer is yes. I think there are a couple other questions that the Ducks have to answer on the back end if they're going to make that sort of jump. You talk about allowing single-digit points per game. I don't care what conference you are playing in. You have to be good in so many different ways, and you have to have elite defensive personnel. Now, Oregon's defensive line should be one of the best in college football. Linebacker unit, some questions. Secondary, some answers and some questions. But the two questions on the back end, by the way, my SSA on that is a 3. I can see it, but there are going to be some other really good units. Notre Dame will be great and will put up great numbers. Ohio State, again. Indiana, again, I'm sure, with the Broyles Award winner, Bryant Haynes, back as their defensive coordinator. And it's Hampton's first time calling plays in the Big Ten. So not impossible, but I don't think super likely. However, the two other questions that Oregon has to answer is Perich as good or as close to as good as Dylan Thieneman, who called game in double overtime at Penn State last year in one of the best moments and best games of the season. And number 2, how high of a quality replacement do you have for Jaden Kennedy? Because by the end of the year, one of the reasons, if you go back and watch that Texas Tech game, which I did the other day because it's a fun watch. When you go back and watch that, what you see are those 3 guys all over the place. By the Brandon Finney being the third. Brandon Finney, of course, is going to be there. He can only get better. Finney's a stud. We know that. But Thieneman and Kennedy were awesome. Flat out. Period. End of discussion. No doubt about it. Very few qualms. I don't even know what points of criticism I would have of those 2 guys after the season they just had. So D-line, I've got no questions about the starters. Linebackers, a couple. Is Perich as good as Dylan Thieneman? We are going to find out. The cornerback 2 position, I think it'll be about the same as last year. The nickel spot, we'll see. We will see. It is something that I'm definitely excited to watch unfold as spring football gets underway in the next couple of weeks and as the spring game plays out on April 25th. So, if you think I'm underselling it, hey, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, however you want to get in touch. I shall break down the next guy in the lineup of 2026 recruits, and he's already a fan favorite without ever having taken a snap, or I don't even know if he's taken a practice rep yet, but it's not just lore with Tristan Phillips. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. It is time. Roll the draft music. It is time, once again, for the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft. Bum, 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 ba, bum, bum, bum. With the first pick in the 2026 5 Hour Energy flavor draft, Spencer McLaughlin hereby selects Strawberry Watermelon from Elite Fruits University. That is the number one player on my big board without question. If you are more of a sweet taste kind of person, then guess what? 5 Hour Energy's got you covered. If you're a fruit guy like me, they've got all sorts of flavors, so make sure you check them out and put your number one flavor on your big board. Find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available on 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Check them out at 5hourenergy.com. This episode also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. I literally just bought more tickets on Game Time. Yeah, I bought 3 more. I've got 5 total tickets on my phone purchased on Game Time. You know why? Because Game Time gives me everything that I want in a ticketing service for any type of event. I've used them to go to basketball games, football games, baseball games, and comedy shows. I've had a great experience every time. The all-in pricing is the best. That you know the total up front, and you get taxes and fees added on at the end. That thing bugs me like no other. I will not go back. Game Time is the way to go. You'll save money. You'll get a great view from your seat so you know what to expect when you arrive. Game Time's the way to go. And it's college basketball season. So if you want to go to college basketball games, that is where you want to go. Take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And you're listening to Locked On Ducks. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. If you listen to the show every day, you get access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On Ducks and several other perks as well, including access to a members-only Discord, access to a Locked On merch store with discounts, all sorts of great stuff. Level up today and become a Locked On Everydayer. I'm excited for Tristan Phillips to play football for Oregon and to become an Oregon fan. Is that the right way to describe it? I don't know, but Tristan Phillips seems to really like Oregon. So for those of you who have forgotten, I shall be going through his profile on today's show. So Phillips is a 6'3", 215-pound linebacker, 4-star recruit from Ventura, California, number 377 player overall nationally in the 24/7 Sports composite ranking, number 28 linebacker, and the number 33 overall player in the state of California, which is, of course, one of the big 3 states in recruiting with Texas and Florida that I talk about all the time. Now, according to Greg Biggins of 24/7, who wrote the scouting report on him, he noted a number of different things, which I'll talk about when I get to the film breakdown here in just a moment. But one thing that he noted is Biggins feels like he can play closer to 240 pounds. Now, I forget which member of the coaching staff it was. Might have been Brian Michalowski, the linebackers coach, B-Mike, as he's referred to. Might have been Chris Hampton. I don't know. One of these quotes came out in the last couple months, and Tristan Phillips got compared to Bryce Boettcher. I think he can be better than Bryce Boettcher. He is a much more highly regarded prospect coming out of high school. Bryce Boettcher was a safety at 6'2", 185 pounds. And then he made the transition to linebacker and, of course, just started racking up tackles all over the place, in addition to being the defensive leader this past season for the Ducks, which I think is a title that goes to Jerry Mixon. I think. But I do not yet know for certain. That'd be my guess. Boettcher finished his Oregon career listed at 6'2", 232 pounds. And one reason that I think Tristan Phillips can be better potentially than Bryce Boettcher, who again was good. I'm not trying to tell you that he was not a good player. He was. and his experience, more than anything, is going to be missed off this Oregon defense going into 2026. Bryce Boettcher didn't have a ton of knockback from the linebacker spot. I think the last guy that Oregon had that had a ton of knockback, I mean, Devin Jackson might be able to, but he's been unable so far to reach his full potential because he's got elite physical traits, which is my ceiling comparison, by the way. I like Phillips more than Jackson. I don't know that I would have said that just based on high school tape alone. Jackson's going into year 5 and has been a solid player for the Ducks. He has not become the all-conference caliber player that, had I been hosting the show at the time he committed, I might have projected him to be. I think Tristan Phillips can absolutely become that sort of guy because when you watch his high school tape, it's of course going to be an adjustment once you step into playing Power 4 football in the Big Ten. He knocks guys back a lot. Offensive linemen, running backs, linebackers, and I think the last linebacker that consistently did that for the Ducks, probably, someone can tell me if I'm overlooking somebody here. I mean, Jeff Bossa had a little, I'd probably go Noah Sewell. I think Noah Sewell was the last elite linebacker in the run game that Oregon had. They've had a lot of really good coverage guys, and you understand why you go that route because teams are throwing the ball a lot nowadays. And sometimes, I mean, one of the one of the biggest plays of the year that happened in the first half of a game was at Washington when Oregon was, I think they were only up 3-0 against the Huskies. Washington's driving down the field, and a ball gets thrown to the end zone, and Jaden Kennedy picks it off. Why can't Denzel Boston make a play on it? Because he's blanketed. By who? Jerry Mixon. So the number of linebackers that can run with an NFL wideout is not a huge list in college football. But I hope that Phillips can retain his athleticism while still being a bit of a thumper. In 2024, he had 80 tackles in 11 games. That was a really good clip. And one of the reasons he racks up a lot of tackles, his athleticism is crazy. Like he just moves in a way that looks very easy while being very explosive. And he plays with a bit of edge and violence about him that you really want from a position like linebacker, where you're going to just hit guys a lot. Tristan Phillips looks like he's a guy that likes to hit people. And, you know, he was on the show last summer. I had him on the pod. And, you know, he's an awesome guy to talk to and has, you know, put himself straight into the middle of the Oregon-Washington rivalry with the way he's just thrown jabs at Husky fans. I think that's toned down a bit in the last few months, but last summer he was just all about it. I can't wait to see him play in that rivalry game. He's also got a couple of highlight plays on his huddle reel at tight end. He's just that type of athlete. I do think his ceiling comparison is Devin Jackson. With the way that he can run sideline to sideline, he could be an elite coverage guy while also being a good run stuffer. I think he can really be one of the most well-rounded linebackers Oregon has had in the last several years. And each of the last two, you know, standout linebackers Oregon has had have been converted safeties. And Bryce Boettcher and Jeff Bossa have done very well. Bossa was second team all Pac-12 in 2023, and Boettcher was, did he get an all-conference? Not, he might have, but you know, Bryce Boettcher might get drafted. He got an NFL Combine invite amongst some other guys. But, you know, the ceiling comparison I make to Devin Jackson, he might not have the straight line speed of Devin Jackson. Few guys do. I don't think Devin Jackson's come anywhere close to hitting his ceiling yet. And we've all been kind of waiting for that eruption of a season from him. It hasn't arrived yet. Maybe 2026 is the year. Maybe. But I think just his athletic gifts are pretty unique. And he can become a really good linebacker for this Dan Lanning defense. And I think he can do anything that's asked of him. You know, blitz a little off the edge, play in coverage, be a run star. I think he can do it all. So his path to playing time is behind the following guys for sure, and then a couple guys maybe. So Jerry Mixon, Devin Jackson, probably your top two linebackers going into next year, probably. not guaranteed. Gavin Nix was a true freshman last year. Dylan Williams and Braden Platt, the redshirt sophomores now from the 2024 class. Kamar Mathudi, of course, went with Tosh Lupoi down to Cal. And then you have Braylon Hodge coming in, the former Michigan State commit. I'll get to him at some point as I keep rolling through the class of 2026 too. But I don't think it's inconceivable. Every time I say that word, I think of the Princess Bride. Inconceivable. If you don't know that line, we're not friends. It's my dad's favorite movie. And it's a great movie. So anyway, in 2026, I'll place the SSA on him playing any type of role, and that includes backup and mop-up duty. I'll place that at a 5. He might need to put on a little weight. Yeah, 215, that's a lot to add early on. Okay, I'm going to knock that down to a 4, make it slightly less likely than a coin flip. But I just think his athletic ability is so good, he could absolutely get on the field. Also depends on the health of a lot of these guys. That was something the linebacker room struggled with last season. But in the future, as a starting caliber player, I've got him at an 8. I think if he sticks with the Ducks, by the time he is a second, maybe even third year player in the system, I think he could be the Bryce Boettcher of the defense, racking up 80, 90, 100 plus tackles in a year, all conference caliber guy. I really like what he brings to the table. Got to put on a little bit of weight perhaps, but overall, yeah, Tristan Phillips, a 4 for this year. Maybe you could get some work in on special teams, but in the future, yeah, I place the SSA and him being a starting guy at a solid 8. So stoked about it. And of course, he already doesn't like Washington, so he just fits. Who's the best player Dan Lanning has coached? I had to think about that for a while. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at CoastPay. CoastPay is giving Locked On College listeners up to $2,000 credit for your business when you get started today. If you manage a crew, construction, HVAC, landscaping, any operation with trucks on the road, you already know how messy gas and materials spending can get. Cards get shared, receipts disappear, and month end turns into a giant headache. CoastPay fixes all of that. CoastPay is the modern fuel card and expense management tool built specifically for fleets. Fuel, maintenance, materials, all on one card with real control and instant visibility. Every transaction shows up the moment that it happens. No surprises. If someone fuels up at an odd time or tries to buy something outside their limit, you'll know instantly. That's why you want to check out CoastPay. Right now, CoastPay is offering our listeners up to $2,000 credit when you get started at coastpay.com/lockedoncollege. Go to coastpay.com/lockedoncollege to see how you can earn up to $2,000 credit. Terms apply. The Coast Visa commercial credit card is issued by Celtic Bank. All card accounts are subject to credit approval. Check them out at coastpay.com/lockedoncollege. So before I get to a very fun question that also is a chance to look back at the Dan Lanning era so far, this question came in. Among the coaching ranks, there seems to be a wide range of time commitment. I know a lot of guys very committed. Many coaches brag about sleeping in their office, while others like Kurt Cignetti and Kyle Whittingham seem to focus more on being efficient and having a life outside of football. Your thoughts on what is most effective? Well, Lanning seems to fit a little bit more into the full court press, spend as much time as he possibly can at the office. Like, he just always wants to get after it. You know, when you watch his post-game pressers, or not post-game, post-practice pressers during spring ball and fall camp, you know, I've talked about this before, and it never fails to make me laugh. He just looks like he wants to answer every question as quickly as possible so he can get on with what he really, you know, wants or needs to be doing. So I think he's more in that camp. But honestly, I don't think there's a better way to go about it. It's whatever works for you. Every coach is different. You know, one of the best early takes I ever had was as a college student, and it was after Virginia lost to UMBC, the Golden Retrievers of Baltimore County. And I was just doing college talk radio with a friend who was hosting, and he asked me as a guest, well, Tony Bennett's all about defense, but man, his team's going to struggle to score. Do you think he's got to change that up? And I said, no. No, I mean, Chip Kelly didn't change what he was back when he was at Oregon. There were difficulties to running a spread system as he did with smaller, more agile offensive linemen who could pull around into space. But no, I wouldn't have told him to be something that he wasn't. I think it just depends on how you're wired from a coaching style standpoint. But based on everything I know and everything I've read, kind of seems like Dan Lanning's a sleep in the office when you can sort of guy. But his family's, of course, awesome as well. I'm sure everybody knows the story with his wife, Sophia, and Game Day's done such a great job of covering that over the last couple of years. Speaking of Dan Lanning, got a fun question that came in. It was a bit of an assignment, and I had to go through and debate a little bit here and there. I'm sure some of you will disagree with this, but you leave your thoughts in the comments below. Shoot me a message if you think I whiffed on somebody. This is pondering both the college career these guys had and what they became in the NFL. One of you tasked me with picking the best player, regardless of position, of each coaching era from Rich Brooks to Dan Lanning. So I will do Lanning first. And I went back and forth between two guys, knowing a wealth of information about both the college and pro careers of all these guys. It came down to Bo Nix or Christian Gonzalez. I landed on Christian Gonzalez. This could be recency bias because I just watched him keep 14 points off the board in the Super Bowl single-handedly while holding the Offensive Player of the Year to, granted, he got hurt for part of the game, like 2 catches on the game. But man, I don't know. Here's an interesting. Okay, I'll take Gonzo over Brandon Finney, obviously, with this selection. But by the time Brandon Finney is done, will we look back and say, I'd take him over Gonzo? I still don't know. He's got to grow. He's got to grow. But the more time goes on in the NFL, the more I think we have to look at that and go, boy, not a mystery why they brought him over from Colorado for a year, because he was, man, that guy was and is very, very good. So Bo Nix, elite, but in the NFL world, Gonzo's a better corner than Bo Nix is a quarterback, and Bo Nix is elite, by the way. In the Mario Cristobal era, this was I was a little tactical with this because I could be. There were no rules that were specifically laid out to me here. In the Mario Cristobal era, Penei Sewell, one of the best Oregon offensive linemen ever. Period, point blank, end of discussion. Next, Willie Taggart, Coach Justin Herbert. See what I did there? That could have been a Mario pick, but that would probably make the most sense. So Herbert for the Taggart era under Helfrich. A lot of different ways that you could go here. But I'll put Mariota under Helfrich since he did coach him to his Heisman season. And then under Chip. Look, I know the NFL career didn't go as some of us thought it would, but I can't in good conscience not put LaMichael James on this list. So, LaMichael James. Because his college career was so insane. I don't know if we'll see a 3-year run from a running back at Oregon the way LaMichael James did. 1,500 yards or more in every single year is crazy, crazy good work. It also breaks my heart that DeForest Buckner has to miss this list, but he just barely didn't make the cut. Under Mike Bellotti, yeah, Joey Harrington's a popular name to throw in here, but I'm going Haloti Ngata. I love Joey, but Haloti, man. That guy. Jeff Schwartz has tweeted out some funny stuff about how good he was back in the day. And then Rich Brooks was an easy pick for me. Gary Zimmerman, if you don't know who Gary Zimmerman is and the career he had at Oregon and beyond, Go look it up. It's rather impressive. So for Rich Brooks, Gary Zimmerman, Mike Bellotti, Haloti Nada. That was why I messed up my O sounds there. Chip, LaMichael James, Helfrich, Mariota, Taggart, Justin Herbert, Cristobal, Penei Sewell, Dan Lanning, Gonzo. That was a trivia question it was like a trivia adjacent question. I did all right, by the way, on the last trivia question. Forgot to follow up with this, and I'll end today's show here. I was asked for the last trivia question. I've got another one. Don't need more submissions for now. Keep them in the back of your mind, though. The question was, in Mariota's Heisman season, what was Oregon's average points and yards per game? I undersold the yards by a lot. I guessed 468, the real number. Actual retail price, 547. That's crazy work. However, my guess on points per game, pretty good. I guessed 44.3, and it was 45.4. That's not bad. So technically it's 0 for 2, but I'm marking that as 1 for 2 in my head. Have a great weekend, everybody. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.